Hello, everybody, and welcome to this second session for the digital stream of the Museums and Heritage Show. Thank you for coming along for this one. I've had kind of some fun helping to curate this stream, and I saw a little bit of this project in the news and on YouTube, I think it was, and it was so exciting. So I got in touch with Jack, and I was so pleased. He said yes to come in and speaking at this. So it's entitled Talk to the Animals, using AI to allow visitors to converse with museum objects. And we have Jack Ashby, who's the Assistant Director the University Museum of Zoology in Cambridge, and we have Abhik Palit, who's Social Science and Partnerships Lead, Nature Perspectives. And I'm just going to hand over to them. Enjoy, and there'll be time for some questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, morning. Thanks so much for coming today. So I'm Jack, I'm from the University Museum of Zoology, and what we're going to do is I'm going to speak for a few minutes just to set the scene of what it is we're talking about, and then Abhik's going to take over for a while to talk about the nature perspective, and then I'll come back and talk about the museum perspective before Abhik closes up. So what are we talking about today? Essentially, this is an example of how AI can be used in museum interpretation. So just to tell you very briefly what it is we've got, is in our Museum of Zoology, which is one of the largest natural history collections in the UK. We have about 2 million specimens, about 160,000 visitors a year. Since November, we initially started this as a pilot project, but we've decided to carry it on for the rest of this year. Visitors can come in, and on 15 of our specimens, there is a QR code which they can scan on their own devices, and that just opens up a chat box where they can talk to our specimens from the specimen's point of view. So visitors can ask any question that they like, and the animal will respond as its own individual. We've chosen a real range of specimens, from cockroaches and butterflies and brain corals to dodos and giant sloths and platypuses and red pandas. So we've picked here like a range that hopefully covers different kinds of object preservation, but also different kinds of whether they're extinct or really common or disliked or well-liked. And the key to the project is essentially it's a conversation. So you can ask on your chat box very, very simple questions that you might expect to put the kind of data on a museum label, like what is the diet of this animal, what did you eat? The animal will respond in the first person. I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but effectively it's just on your phone. You can type the question in, you can speak the question in, you can listen to the answer, or you can read the answer. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're talking about. We believe, and no one has contradicted us so far, that this is the first use of AI where visitors can talk to an object from the object's point of view. I'm sure it won't be the last. This is an experiment. So as I said, we started it as a pilot, and we are really interested to see if it can work like this. What we're trying to do is kind of open up, democratize museum interpretation. You know, when I write a label, my 90 words are what I think are interesting about this specimen. When a visitor uses the Nature Perspectives app, they are choosing what information they want to find out. So they can ask literally any question they like. I'm going to stop there, hand over to Abhik, and take from there.
Thank you so much, Jack. Good morning, everyone. My name is Abhik. I am the social science lead and also the co-founder of Nature Perspectives. So at Nature Perspectives, what we do is we help people have conversations with non-human beings, with AI simulations of non-human beings. A swan on the river Cam, a giant, massive coral at the Museum of Zoology, a tree in Jesus Greens. What we want to do is we want to enable people to have these conversations with these non-human beings so that we can reimagine how we engage with the natural world. We want to transform apathy to renewed empathy towards the natural world. We want to produce opportunities to be able to learn about the natural world, and also if people want to take action for nature, we want to provide avenues, suggestions for how they can actually take actions for nature. So how does this actually work? So before I dive into how the technology actually works, I'd like to speak about our theoretical underpinnings. So, and why we believe that conversation is such a great method for achieving something like this. Now, anyone who's actually learned anything from a friend, learned anything from a teacher, actually asked anyone, hey, can you explain this to me? Or ask them, how do you actually do this? Knows the incredible power of conversation as a teaching method, as a learning tool. What also happens is when you speak to these perspectives in the first person, the emotional impact that these conversations can have on you is immense. Now imagine reading somewhere that there's been an oil spill in the ocean as compared to talking to a dolphin and it reporting to you what is the impact of an oil spill in the ocean on its own life. What we call this is perspective taking. It's a recognized theory. What happens in perspective taking is you start to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and look at things from their perspective, look at things from their point of view, and that can actually boost your ability to feel empathy towards them. And we call this expanding our circle of empathy, which says that if something is very different from us or is too distant from us, it's very hard for us to actually care about it. What having these conversations with these national entities does is brings them inside your circle of empathy. And the philosophical underpinnings of our work is the work of Bruno Latour, who, for example, speaks about the actor network theory and says that nature is not just a stage upon which humans are playing out their lives. Nature itself and natural entities are also actors in the system. And the philosophy of Hannah Pitkin, who says that to make something present in a place where it has now been absent is to give it power. So just by representing things in a platform where they find no representation, you can actually empower them. And we think that these are the sort of methods, and this is the sort of thinking where we want to signal a paradigmatic shift towards considering nature, towards hearing nature, and feeling what nature has to say and understanding it. So how is it that we do it? We think that representing nature through artificial intelligence is not only an incredible opportunity, it is also an incredible responsibility. So our work has these three pillars that underpin it. First is scientific integrity. We want to make sure that all of the information that is provided by these simulations, by these perspectives are always 100% accurate, that all the facts that are being provided by it are checked and are accurate. The second thing is unmediated engagement. This is something that we're very passionate about. We do not want to be further contributors to the enslavement of man to their devices. Our perspectives, our experiences, our entire user interface always projects your attention outwards. It is always asking you to engage with nature in an unmediated way, whether it be to look more closely at a museum specimen, or whether it be to listen to the call of the bird song, or whether it is to feel the rough bark of a tree and then feel the softness of petals. We're always asking people to engage with nature in an unmediated, direct manner. And the last is respectful representation. The ethical implications of representing something, a living being with its own agency, are not lost upon us. But we do not only want to adhere to best practices in this field, we actually want to pioneer it. So what we want to do is we want to bring together these interdisciplinary groups of experts and these panels and find out what is the most ethical way of representing nature using AI. Is it okay to give a kangaroo fur from Australia an Australian accent, or is that weird? Just answering all these different questions such as this through convening and finding out, formulating these extensive guidelines for the respectful and ethical representation of national entities using artificial intelligence. So what we do is we create a digital mind. So you might ask, what is a digital mind? I'd like to ask, has anyone been to the Museum of Zoology in Cambridge? Has anyone seen the fin whale? Have you? Yeah? It's a magnificent specimen. So right when you enter, there's like a 60-foot skeleton of a blue whale which is hanging over you. Now, what we do is we're very different from very basic chatbots. It's not a simplistic exercise. What we do is we create digital minds. So that fin whale, for example, not only does it know all the biological characteristics of a fin whale, not only does it know about the habitat that it inhabits, not only does it know about the social, like how it socializes with other fin whales and so on and so forth, it has memories of its own. So that fin whale knows where exactly its bones were picked up from. It knows that it used to be situated outside of the museum for a very long time, and it's only been in the last 10 years or so that it's been actually brought inside the museum. So it has memories. It has particular speech patterns. It has a personality. It has humor and quirks. So for example, we have this hedgehog, which will get irritated if you talk to it in the day. It'll be like, why are you disturbing my sleep? We have a squirrel, which will somehow always find the way of bringing the conversation back to nuts. You'll be talking about something and suddenly you're like, yeah, but I really care about my nuts. So they have their own personality. So it really feels like they're individuals. They also have enhanced awareness. So for example, the fin whale knows exactly where it is situated in the world, but also within the museum. It knows what are the other specimens that are around it. It also knows the time of the day. So it has enhanced awareness and much, much more, which is a secret sauce. We don't want to give away too much of it, but these are some aspects which actually help us create that digital mind. Additionally, all of our perspectives are age adaptive, so they speak to you at your level. They're multilingual, so they speak to you in your own language. We've got conversations around 25 to 30 different languages that are happening already, and all of them are locally relevant. So it is very conscious of where it is situated, so it will not give you the sort of conversations that feel decoupled from the place where it is situated. And what we say is we say that this enables real-world coupling, which is that talking to the perspective and all that it says and looking at it, you start feeling like, yeah, you are talking to this individual and not just some AI entity on your phone. And that's what we call real-world coupling. So it brings us to the question of why museums. So we conducted a public engagement pilot in Cambridge where we put out QR codes all across the city, and suddenly people woke up and they're like, oh, there's QR code saying talk to a squirrel. Why don't you talk to this tree? Why don't you talk to this swan? We had a huge amount of success with this. We got a great response. And then we thought, yes, the next frontier for us to explore is museums. Because museums are trusted places for learning and exploration for time immemorial now. We also thought that our experience had the potential to transform the visitor experience inside the museum, going from a one-way transmission of information to a two-way sort of interaction through which you can actually learn whatever you want to learn, which is the democratization of knowledge, which Jack also mentioned. When a museum puts up a plaque and decides these are the 4 things that we want to put up in this, a visitor might not be interested in that, especially if you have a 4-year-old child coming along with a 75-year-old grandfather. Both of them looking at the skeleton of a dodo might not have the same motives. And you can engage the grandfather with a different narrative as compared to the child. So what we do is we democratize in that sort of way that people can ask exactly what they want to know about it. And lastly, we can provide actionable insights for institutions. There'll be more on that later. But also, it's not just for museums. We also work with botanic gardens, with nature reserves, municipalities, and other institutions to find different avenues in which we can represent natural entities and find different outcomes from it, which I will again get back to later. I'll hand over to Jack again.
Thanks, Avik. So I just want to give you kind of the museum perspective point of view on what I've taken from this, and I guess at some point my own visitor journey as well. So at the Museum of Zoology, as a university museum, we are very much interested in trialing things out for the sector as a kind of an experimental test bed and seeing how they go and then sharing the results with you. Today is one of those opportunities, but we're going to be, as a team, publishing more on this in due course when we have a bit more data. So it's obvious that AI is up and coming, and I'm sure the reason that you're here is because you're interested in how it could possibly be used in museum interpretation. What was kind of amazing about this partnership, which I don't think is particularly normal in a partnership between a museum and a tech company, is that we both have exactly the same aims. So when Nature Perspectives came to me and said, we're a company that are trying to use AI to make people engage with the natural world, our literal #1 job is to make people engage with the natural world. So that is quite a nice partnership. So we're obviously trying to see if that is what is happening. It also helped that the Nature Perspectives teams are all graduates from the university's Masters in Conservation Leadership, which is based in our building, which is handy. So what we want to see is whether giving, as Abhik said, giving a perspective to a natural entity. So will it make people more engaged with the natural world? So will talking to a cockroach make people more fond of cockroaches? And we see it both as a visitor engagement offer and as this experiment. So we're still learning what the data might tell us, but some of the things that I think are quite interesting, seeing what are coming out of it already is, when we put something on display in a museum, in a natural history museum, we're asking that specimen to represent its entire species, or even bigger, its entire group. That dodo is not just the individual dodo, but it's also all dodos that have ever lived, or in fact, all extinct animals or all animals from Mauritius. And when you talk to an object in a first-person conversation, does that make visitors see that animal as an individual? Which is, I don't think, is generally what's happening when people come into a museum. And I think we're trying to test that to see how people are using kind of you in questions. Are you happy here, and things like that. And I'm also interested in seeing whether the kind of specimens shape people's relationships to them. So does it being extinct change the way that people engage with it? Does it being a skeleton, which is kind of this clinical, impersonal object, make people less likely to see it as an individual than, for example, a taxidermy animal, which is a whole thing? So we don't have the answers to those questions yet, but watch this space. What we're also able to measure, as I think Abhik will be telling you later, because we're getting thousands of conversations, thousands of messages, we're able to say whether, measure using AI, whether there is an emotional response, whether we can track learning, whether people are kind of changing their mind about animals through the course of a conversation. And most importantly, perhaps, we can see what people are interested in their questions. So I just want to give you my visitor journey, if you like. I've run a lot of tech projects in museums, but I am not at all a tech person. I do not use AI in my life in any way other than this project. So I came from this with a very, very low level of knowledge or even expectation. And I have to say that my first interactions with it were very, very straight. Like, what do you eat? Where did you live? What eats you? Things like that. Very factual information that I would expect as someone writing a label that might be on the label, right? And I was also a little bit skeptical because if visitors want to know something about an object, about an animal or a species or anything, they obviously have the opportunity to just Google that question. I don't think people do that very much, but that option is there. So are we really providing a need here? However, what I saw was I went very quickly from these straight questions to seeing that there was an actual personality behind them. And you could ask it far more discursive questions, far more ethical questions, or even fun questions. So when we launched this, honestly, I had not prepared myself for the media reaction to it. We had hundreds of kind of top-level broadcast press journalists. I was live on Kay Burley with Sky News. Telegraph came and kind of tried to break it, as you would imagine, asking it questions that were kind of very, very political. The team has built good guardrails to make sure you can't break out of the AI mode, but you can have a conversation about literally anything. So it was during the Conservative leadership elections, and the Telegraph journalists asked the whale, who do you want to win the election? And it said, we're removed from human politics, but we don't really have a say in this, but as long as it's someone who cares about nature, we don't really mind, which is a perfect political answer, I think. And it's coded, they have coded it so that all of the questions kind of pivot back to this making people feel connected to the natural world. So even a fairly straightforward question like the what do you eat, red panda question earlier, you might have read that to see that it ends up going to making a far more kind of environmental question. So just to give you a couple of examples of what it might say, to show this journey. So I asked the dodo, what do you eat? First question. And it gives you a pretty dry answer. It gives you a pretty standard answer of what they actually eat. But then it has led the conversation into a far more interesting conversation about how dodos were keystone species, that the tree on Mauritius was dependent on them. You don't need to read it, but that's what it says. But then, as I said, I thought I could feel there was more to it. It wasn't just a Google search box. And so, I don't know if you know, but there is a conversation about cloning dodos. I myself am very anti this. And so I asked it whether we could clone a dodo. And it's a very gentle response, but effectively it's saying, don't you think we should care about species that we've still got here? So which is, as it happens, my own point of view. But I didn't code it. It is taking us into this ethical debate. I asked it then whether you think whether we should try, not just can we clone you, but should we clone you? And it's, again, got a really interesting perspective on that. I'll also just highlight something, I don't know if you can read this, but it's saying, it doesn't say on the one hand, there's this theory. It's saying on the one wing, there's this theory. So there is humor in there, which I honestly don't know how you do that sort of thing. But it's, I was very much blown away with how this could work as a conversational tool. To give you some numbers, it's all very dry, and it's obviously hard to contextualize beyond the Museum of Zoology in terms of how many QR codes there are, how cluttered it is. We get about 10 or 15,000 visitors a month, so in the 5 or 6 months since it's been up, these numbers aren't huge. So that is single-digit percentages of our visitors have interacted with this. Obviously, more than one person can use a device at the same time, but the numbers of conversations are pretty massive. So we have 24,000 messages that have been exchanged in that time. People are talking back and forth, so there's at length. So they're not engaging with that many objects, so there's 1.7 per visitor. There are 15 in the museum with the opportunity. But they're talking, for example, 8 conversational messages. It's quite a few. And I don't know how many, whether that is, how that compares to a human conversation, because obviously we don't tend to track questions like that. But some people go on for nearly 100 messages. That was a 55-year-old woman visitor. So it's kind of, people are interested in this. And people can take their devices away, obviously, and continue to chat outside the museum walls. I mentioned that we can find out what people are interested in. So again, I don't expect you to read this, but it's just to say that they are using AI to code what the conversations are about. And yeah, up top, what you'd expect are quite natural historical facts. So what do you eat? What are your adaptations? But the third on there is nostalgic memories and past connections. So people are entering their own reflection. So that is a measure of engagement and connectedness. The fourth one down is specimens as individuals. So these are, seeing our aim of getting people engaged in the natural world. Just to finish on, from my point of view, on the kind of concerns that I had and I'm interested in, is, as Avik mentioned, there are ethical considerations to putting a artificial perspective on something else. I think I'm perfectly satisfied with how nature perspectives have done that for our animals, but I think if you work in other kinds of museums, it might not be so straightforward. I've had conversations with people in anatomical museums who are thinking of putting perspectives on their human remains, which I think is a whole different thing. If you're giving perspective to historical figures, obviously you have to think about the appropriateness of particularly minoritized people and who is giving them that voice or who is coding that voice. Just because how pilot projects rush out in particularly our museum, we didn't do quite enough groundwork in kind of safeguarding our volunteers or easing the concerns of our volunteers who thought their jobs were being replaced. I think what we're saying is that people are asking nature perspectives very, very different questions than what they are asking our kind of visitor engagement volunteers and staff. And we could have done better just to explain exactly what was happening and how it was working. So if you're going into a project like that, I'd think about this. Well, I'm sure we've all heard about the environmental impacts of AI LLMs, and we haven't quite got the data on this back. I was less worried about it when it was a pilot project, but I don't know if you can say more, but what the kind of data so far is, it's around the same carbon as an email per conversation, so which isn't too bad, I think, but it is a consideration. And then obviously accuracy is a big deal, and so far, again, they're using an independent LLM to test the accuracy, and it's coming out incredibly high. Obviously, not everything we tell people in person in a museum is necessarily accurate, or what we put on the labels. Just to be honest, seems to be very good at statements of fact. There are things, and indeed, like I've read something that it said, and as a zoologist, I think, well, that's not true. And then I look it up, and actually it was true. But it's kind of inferred information. I think it's slightly sketchier on. So when there is an implied piece of knowledge behind a statement, the testing model can't pick it up as a statement of fact, so we can't test it. So I mean, this is early stages, but it's things to think about. But for me, there's clear, like as a kind of AI novice, this was a significant success, and I think it is changing the way visitors are, those visitors that do use it are engaging with our objects, which is great.
Thank you so much for that, Jack. Now, till now we've spoken about most of the things on the front end of things. We're talking about visitor experience. We're talking about how these perspectives are engaging, how people are conversing with them. Now I want to take you into what in my opinion, is the most exciting part of the entire initiative, which is our back end. So through Nature Perspectives, we have created the first ever database of human interactions with natural entities. Now think about it. All of you, like everyone must have spoken to their dog. People have spoken to their plants. People have spoken to their cats. People have spoken to the sun and cursed at it when it's too hot. People have spoken to clouds, cursed at it when it's raining too much. But there are no records of such conversations. This is the first time that we have created a database of all of these conversations, which can be accessed through our dashboard. And it gives you, at the first level, access to all of the metadata about your conversations. How many conversations have taken place, how many visitors have signed up, how many perspectives are they speaking to, what is the geographical distribution, what is the gender distribution, what is the age distribution. But then it starts getting a bit more interesting, which is that all of this data, we can then process it again through artificial intelligence and start to analyze it. So when we analyze each and every conversation, I can see across the 5,000, 6,000 conversations which perspectives, which entities have been the most popular, but also what are the things that people have expressed an interest in understanding, as Jack said. Apart from that, we also go further and we talk about influencing hearts and we talk about influencing minds. So within the hearts parameters, we have things like, is our conversation able to evoke empathy within the user? Are we able to change the overall sentiment in the conversation across this conversation? So are we able to change people's attitude towards, for example, you start talking to a cockroach and it's clear from your words that you don't like cockroaches. Over the space of 30 messages, can I change your attitude towards cockroaches? Like, can you try to understand why they're trying to hide inside your kitchen? Can you try to understand why it's not good for you to try to kill them? Apart from that, the minds, which is what are the total learning opportunities that emerge, how people engage with these learning opportunities. We use that to give them a learning score, which is to say that, okay, I presented you with the fact. Did you just ignore the fact? Or did you actually engage with the fact? Or did you engage very deeply with the fact and go back and read more about it? Also, factual accuracy is very, very important to us. Also, we want to make sure that all of our conversations are on topic. So our perspectives are always trained to bring the conversation back towards nature. So you might start asking, did you see the new movie? And you'll be like, oh, that's great. I love that humans love movies. For me, I love watching the fish play inside the river. So it'll always find a way to bring the conversation back towards nature and keep things on topic. Apart from that, of course, general visitor engagement numbers, total messages, how many visitors do you get per month, how many visitors continue their conversation beyond simulation location, and so on and so forth. And what this allows you to do is, basically you can start asking the most interesting questions ever, because in real time, you're getting all this analysis done. So today I can actually ask, okay, children between 5 to 10 years of age, what are they most interested in learning about nature? Is the perception of tigers in India different from the perception of tigers in the United States, different from the perception of tigers in the United Kingdom? And also, what sort of communication really works? Like if I'm trying to get Jack to water his plant, is it better for me to tell him, oh, if you don't water the plant will die? Or is it better for the plant to say, whenever you water me, I feel really happy? Or is it like I should exhort a sense of responsibility, saying that, I'm a living being inside your house. It is your responsibility to care for me. So as development sector, as conservation sector practitioners, we always struggle with what works, what sort of communication is best for behavior change. And I think this gives you an incredible way to try to tap into those questions and try to get them answered. And we're in the process of actually adding an AI feature even within this. So basically we'll have so as soon as you have a conversation, your conversation goes into the database. And the database is then populated and accessed through the dashboard. And we have introduced an AI feature. It's not perfect yet, but which can enable you to ask any sort of questions that you ask from your data. Okay, and you can ask, what are the things that people want to know the most about Wales? And it'll look at all of your data and answer that question for you. You can ask, what are the most major differences between interactions between the perspectives and old people and younger people, or differences between gender when it comes to a particular specimen, and so on and so forth. So any sort of question that you want to ask tomorrow, you can answer. Just to start wrapping up, so we don't see nature perspectives as being contained to just museums and botanical gardens. Now that we are exploring what all this platform can do, we are thinking of how can we employ it in advocacy campaigns. This is something that I'm really excited about, non-human news, which is that all of the news that we ever get is always from a human perspective. So today there's been a road widening project. We have cut 1,000 trees, and the distance, so the time taken from city A to city B has gone down by half an hour. But we never start to think that, okay, how is it affecting the antelopes in that region? So imagine an article about the road widening project, not written by a human, but written by an antelope. And it's speaking about how this road widening project is going to affect its migratory patterns, or it is going to affect its movement and its habitat and fragmentation of its habitat. So that's one thing that I'm excited about, and it's endless. The possibilities are endless. We want to situate the first interspecies social media, for example. Imagine you're sitting and you're like, oh my God, it's another gloomy day. It was so nice for the last 1 week. It was so nice and sunny, and now it's raining again. And then somebody comments on your post saying, actually, I'm quite happy that it's raining again. I was quite parched. And you look to see who has commented, and you see it's a tree. A tree has commented saying, I understand that you enjoyed the sun for the past 1 week, but I was parched and I'm happy that it's raining today. So again, taking into consideration the perspectives of non-human beings is what we're really aiming for. And we think that the sort of transformation that this can enable in society can be a paradigmatic shift towards considering nature's voices within our choices, making more responsible choices as governments, as organizations, as institutions, and as individuals as well. That's more or less it. Thank you so much for your time today. Jack and I will now be available to take questions, so we'll be very happy, and afterwards also you can speak to us.
So yes, don't be shy. Anybody who has a question, please, do you mind going to... And the mic will come to you to ask the question.
Thank you for the presentation. It's really fascinating. I have a tiny question about if you have any... Yeah, it was good. It was fascinating. I like it. And it's a brilliant idea. But how do you deal with the group tour? Like if you, 5 or 10 people come that wanted to engage at the same time? Or some of them, because I also see the age distribution too, and younger age was quite majority of the groups. And if you have the preschool kids over there, they cannot writing text, or the reading a text has difficulty a little bit, then how can you solve the problem?
So to answer the second question first, you can speak your question into the phone, so that a child can just ask it and it will speak out loud the response. With a group, I guess many group tours don't interact with museum objects in the same way that an individual visitor does. So this is a layer on top of our standard museum interpretation. So people are doing it on their own device. So it's, they can do that if they want to during a tour, but in the same way that we wouldn't necessarily to stop and expect people to listen to a sound installation during a group tour. We wouldn't necessarily expect people to do this during a group tour, but it's not in the same way that any device-based interactive is not necessarily great for groups. We are certainly seeing that with children. It will be on their adult's device that they would be doing it. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that a lot of the times we see 3 or 4 people interacting in the same device, especially families. It's all right. If you talk about larger groups, we haven't really explored that yet, but that's a good idea. Maybe we'll think about it and find out how we can enable it for a larger group of people. But it is basically, the beauty of it is that each individual can speak to it according to what they want to speak to it. maybe we can have larger groups speaking with one person speaking and other people listening, but definitely a great answer, like a great question. We can look into how we can make that happen.
Another question? Just here.
So I was just wondering, because you sort of mentioned already the environmental impact, and I guess we hear a lot of quite intense stuff about like how bad AI is and that kind of thing. Do you have a strategy for how you're going to keep the environmental impact lower as you kind of increase your databases, and will that be made available to potential customers?
Yes, that is a great question. We are conservationists at heart. We studied our masters in conservation leadership, so it is very, very important to us that we go by the principle of do no harm. We should look, so not only do we aim to offset all of our emissions and the environmental impact, we are very much aiming to be extremely nature positive. The first thing is we do not create and train new AI models. We are using off-the-shelf AI models that already exist there, and we've actually kept it flexible that we can change the AI models that we plug into our backend. That's the first part of it. So we are essentially, when you have a conversation with Nature Perspectives through your device, it is basically just like you using ChatGPT on your computer. So it does not incur any additional training costs. So right now, when we're calculating the cost of our conversations, then the cost of one mid-length conversation is more or less equivalent to sending off one email. But we are also aware of scale. If this scales up, our environmental impact also gets much more this thing. The way we are thinking about this is, as I said, we want to be nature positive. It is not just we could pay somebody to plant trees for us, but through our entire initiative itself, the sort of behaviors that we are encouraging people to plant more trees, to protect wildlife species, to be more conscious in their consumption, to water their plants and so on and so forth. So we want the impact of not just our platform, but the conversations that people have through that platform to actually feed back into our environmental impact. So if I'm able to convince people to plant 20 trees, that's going to offset the impact of their conversations for like an entire year. If I can convince people to make more ethical and more responsible choices, that is also something that is offsetting the impact of our work. We think that it's an important question to be answered, but it should not be deterring us from going forward and trying to make something that has an overall better impact than if we were not to do anything.
Good question. Anybody else? Another question at the back, I think? Over here.
Hi, hello. Thank you for your incredible sharing and the incredible project you're working on. So I want to ask whether you have observed or monitored any cases that the AI answered with something that's not exactly relevant or maybe not exactly accurate, like how we sometimes experience when using ChatGPT. And if yes, how could we prevent visitors from leaving the museum with something that's not so accurate?
Sure. No, that's also a very good question. So this phenomenon is referred to as hallucination. So AI models are notorious for always wanting to answer your questions, whether they know it or not. So if they don't really have the real answer, they'll kind of make something up. So the way we guard against that is firstly by curating the training data set. We only rely on extremely well established sources for the training data which it is picking up on. So we're only looking at scientific journals, we're only looking at scientific magazines, we're looking at peer-reviewed journals and so on and so forth. So we've specifically instructed it to not pick up things from Twitter, for example, or pick up information from other unreliable websites. So the first part of it is to make sure that the training data is as pristine as possible, that is picking up things from the right place. The second thing is advanced guardrails that we employ. We have trained our models to make sure that they are double checking what they are saying, and it's always instruction to them that if they do not know something for very certain, that do not answer the question. You can answer and you can tell it that you do not know it. The third layer of it is constant monitoring. So as you can see in the dashboard that I presented, there's a factual accuracy section. So when the conversation has already happened, it'll be fed back into another AI model, and then we will analyze the entire conversation to find out what are the factually inaccurate statements that have been made. Now, right now, we are getting a factual accuracy of around 99.8%, and even those ones, the inaccuracies, they're not like giving inaccurate statements. It's about saying that when the whale does not exactly tell you the right place where its bones were transported from, so it might give you like an incorrect route or something. But if you ask it how does a whale digest its food, it'll always give you the right answer for that. But as I said, there's a three-step system how we monitor this, and one thing is like constant monitoring to make sure that if the accuracy of the statements drop, then we can go back and we can identify exactly where it has happened and why it has happened.
If I can just add, the bits that I've spotted that I think, oh, that's not quite right, are mainly about the individual specimen's history. So that's the data I've provided, where obviously we don't know the conception to modern day history of every one of our specimens, but so I think it's filling in blanks when we have provided not quite enough information, which is interesting. So I think, where it's got much richer kind of natural history or scientific statements of facts, that it can draw on a vaster wealth of knowledge, then it seems to be much better. It's the very specific things about the individual objects where we haven't provided enough information, partly because we don't know where I think are the slightly questionable bits. And I expect also those bits aren't picked up by your testing models because you don't have the statements to check them against either.
That's the end of our session. Thank you very much. That's just been brilliant. I found it so interesting. So thanks to Jack and Abhik. I want to know more now, so I should be looking more into it. And thanks everybody for your questions and coming along.
Thanks.